Before we start today, this episode discusses violent pornography. From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Tuesday, July 2. Labor's rogue Senator Fatima Payman says she feels like an exile after being dumped from caucus. The Prime Minister says he punished Payman for ruining the government's big promotion of its July 1 tax cuts by going on TV at the weekend to explain why she voted with the Greens in support of Palestine. House prices will rise 7% this year, according to Australia's biggest bank. It's all because demand is outstripping supply, and prices could go up another 5% in 2025. That's live at theaustralian.com.au right now. Australian kids are being exposed to pornography on popular social media sites like Facebook, Instagram and TikTok before they turn 13. And Australia's e-Safety Commissioner is putting the heat on tech giants to come up with measures to protect children. If they fail, Julie Inman-Grant says she'll impose mandatory codes of conduct. Today, can Australia really force tech giants to do anything? Scrolling.
I always pack way too damn much, but you never know what you're gonna need.
Travel, pets.
Are you supposed to be in the pool, Duke? Did Mommy say you can go in the pool?
Strangely mesmerising makeup tutorials.
Get ready with me for dinner with the girls.
If you keep swiping for long enough, you might wind up somewhere depressing, like the so-called manosphere, where creepy dudes like Andrew Tate spew hate about women.
So they call me a misogynist and I'm anti-woman. I'm pro-woman. The best way you can improve the lives of women is make men, better at being men. Because when a man is a good
And then, especially if you are young, it can get even darker. Nudity, revenge porn, violence, abuse. More than half of children and adolescents have been exposed to porn on social media, according to new research released today by Australia's e-Safety Commissioner Julie Inman-Grant. It says most kids first encounter adult content around age 13, and for many much younger, and when they haven't gone looking for it. Jeff Chambers is The Australian's chief political correspondent. Jeff, you spoke to Julie Inman-Grant, and she's realistic about the fact that young people may and often will seek out pornography as they get older. But this is different. Why is it different?
10 years ago, when Facebook emerged, that was really the primary sort of social media platform. There were porn websites and things like that. But now we've just had this proliferation, this explosion in growth in a range of social media platforms, encrypted messaging apps, even in and around gaming, where a lot of young Australian children are being exposed to pornographic material, quite often inadvertently. They're not necessarily seeking it out, but there's a lot of pop-ups. People are sending unsolicited dick pics and other explicit material, and it's really seeped its way into the schoolyards and into homes. So it is just becoming so much more difficult for families and parents to know what their kids are seeing online.
We all remember the mortification of that talk with our parents, awkward conversations about sex as adolescents slapped us in the face. Or maybe we worked it out for ourselves with the help of some self-appointed experts in the playground. But now those opportunities for parents to have conversations about sex, about healthy relationships, respect, intimacy, are being subverted by social media. And according to the new research, kids are aware of how it can affect their ideas of sex, relationships and gender, but they feel like they're losing control of their own online experience.
It's that repeat exposure And it's often peer pressure, particularly when young Australians move into high school and get to their teenage years. And one of the issues raised by Julie Inman Grant is the fact that they're seeing this violent, extreme pornography without any guidance, context, or any appropriate maturity levels, because they might think that a video showing a man aggressively choking a woman during sex on a porn site is what consent, sex, and healthy relationships should look like. And I think that's why Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese are both on a bit of a unity ticket here to try and put every single layer of protection in place, because we know that this unfettered access to pornography at such a young age, when kids are still developing, can have really perverse outcomes, whether that is just awful bullying at the very least, to self-harm, suicide and eating disorders.
Now, the E-Safety Commissioner has the tech platforms in her sights. Julie Inman Grant has given tech giants like Google, Meta, Snapchat and TikTok 6 months to come up with voluntary codes to protect kids from porn, along with other potentially harmful content like suicide, serious illness, self-harm and disordered eating. She wants barriers like age verification and tools that allow users or their parents to filter or blur out unwanted sexual content.
And I guess this goes to one point that I hadn't really thought about, but when a parent buys their child an iPad or an iPhone, quite often there is an opt-in element around parental controls and safety measures. And one of the simple things that's being raised here is possibly these big tech providers can make that an opt-out default setting. And if you do that, I think most adults will know that they've got to get in and change that if they wish to change that, if there are no children using it, because the trends show that when it is an opt-in arrangement, that many people forget about it, don't do it, or don't do it properly.
If they don't front up, Inman Grant says she'll set rules for the tech platforms with mandatory standards. Julie Inman Grant has issued notices to these organisations, giving them 6 months to come up with their own enforceable codes. And she's saying that if they don't do that, she'll take action. But Jeff, this feels like the second issue on which this government is saying to tech giants, if you don't clean up your act, we're going to wave a big stick at you. The other being the social media giants' refusal in some instances to pay for the news content that they use. So why not just go straight to the big stick?
Look, they may well end up there. So Julie Inman Grant has the Online Safety Act, and under phase 1, that was looking at child sex abuse material, terrorist and extremist materials, and this is part of phase 2. We saw in phase 1 there had been some participation by some of these tech firms, most of them based overseas, most of them in the US, very cashed up, very lawyered up outfits. And what we saw just in recent weeks was the lack of involvement in terms of a voluntary code. Julie Inman Grant had to regulate mandatory codes under law, Australian law, and they've given 3 months for these platforms and tech companies to come forward with their plans around protecting kids from pornography and a hard December deadline. Now, the argument goes, and a lot of people will say it, that, well, clearly Australia can't do much in this space, but we're seeing other Western countries going down this same path as we are. And I think it's always important to get action to ensure that all of the other countries, such as the US and the UK and the European Union, they all go in a pack to try and force action. And I think it's demanded when we talk about protecting kids, whether it's from child sex material, but in this case, pornography and some of those perverse outcomes of that, I think that they have to try and do something.
Coming up, the tech companies' explanations for why they haven't cleaned up before now. And can the government actually scare them into action? Don't forget to check us out at theaustralian.com.au and consider subscribing. It's where all the action's happening 24/7. We'll be back after this break. So why is Julie Inman Grant asking the social media sites to act instead of forcing them to? Well, she says the tech companies themselves have to create the solutions, like reliable age verification tools that kids just can't trick, for example. Do you think, though, Jeff, as a seasoned observer of the way big companies behave in their relationships with government, are they actually going to comply with this?
And this is the difficulty for this one, because Julie McGrant describes it as a stack, but there is so many different layers of that stack where you will get breaches. Maybe one company does the right thing, but then using that platform or that technology or device, there will be other areas where that stack is fractured. And I guess I don't think that they're seeing that they'll get a foolproof 100% ironclad protection for kids, but they're trying to put as many different layers as possible. To go to your question about these big, cashed up, well-resourced companies, the history shows that they do everything they can to get out of adding extra layers of complexity or costs for themselves.
The codes won't just apply to websites and social media. Search engines, hosting services, internet service providers, instant messaging programs, SMS, chat, multiplayer gaming, online dating services, and hardware manufacturers will also be on the hook.
So we're starting to see changes. We just need to see consistency across the industry. I wouldn't say that there's any company in particular that I think is doing nothing. I think collectively they all need to do more.
She is very concerned that if unfettered access to online pornography by children is not urgently reversed or controlled in a way, that Australia is facing a harmful sexual socialisation of an entire generation. And she reflected on the fact that this current age is not like the days of the penthouse that your dad hid in his sock drawer. It's now available without any real impediments. And it's just becoming easier for kids to get around blocks. And it's becoming a really, really difficult issue for parents to police.
Jeff Chambers is The Australian's chief political correspondent. Thanks for joining us on The Front. And don't forget, you can read all the coverage of Labor's unfolding crisis in the Senate right now at theaustralian.com.au.